Another excellent way to preserve the integrity of your data as it gets entered into a table here in Microsoft Access is to use something called an input mask. An input mask is very helpful in forcing how data gets entered. Not exactly what data gets entered, but how it looks when it is entered. I like to use the example of dates. Everybody likes to enter dates a different way. You may like to enter them day, month, year using slashes, while I may prefer month, day, year using dashes. Well, that wouldn't work in a table if we're both inputting data at the same time. So we want to enforce data integrity by keeping it consistent, making sure that anyone who enters data is entering it the exact same way. And this is what an input mask will do for us. In the previous lesson, we looked at field properties for this rating field here. We changed some of the properties to make sure there were no decimal places, that it was a number going in, it's centered. You can see down here the default value is set to 4 in our new record that's about to be created. The 4 is already there. So we were able to get closer to data integrity by setting up some of the field properties. Now we're going to go back to the design view to set up an input mask. You'll notice up here on the title bar I'm using Music Library 4B. And I got that from the Lesson 4 folder of the exercise file. So if you're skipping to this lesson, just go ahead and open that one up to get all caught up. The next thing I'm going to do is switch over to Design View. There's a couple different ways to do that. Look down here in the bottom right-hand corner on the status bar. There are view buttons down here, including Design View. We've got our Pivot Chart, Pivot Table, and Datasheet View. Datasheet View is currently selected. That's what we're looking at right now. An even faster way to switch between the design and datasheet views is to use this button up here. On the view drop-down, we'll see those same 4 choices, but right above is the design view icon. So we click on that to switch to design view, and it changes to the datasheet view. So I can click it to switch back and forth quickly and easily. So in the design view, again, we're going to focus in on this rating field here. Down below in the field properties, you can see what we set up in the previous lesson. But now we're going to go to the input mask right here. Now, an input mask, when we're working with a number field like this, requires us to enter it manually. There is a button to help automate things, but that'll be working with a text field or a date field. Now, an input mask is broken up into 3 sections, and the 3 sections are separated by semicolons. The first section is going to contain characters, both the literal characters and the mask characters. The literal characters are the ones that actually stay there, like brackets around an area code and dashes. And the mask characters are representative of what's going to go into this field. That's the first section. After the semicolon then is where we choose whether or not we're going to keep the mask characters with the data that gets entered and store that in the table, or do we just want the data? And then after the next semicolon, the third section is where we decide if we're going to use a placeholder or not. So if we were entering phone numbers, we might want to have the pound sign representing the various numbers, just so people know how many characters they need to input. But it's optional. We don't have to have it either. So for our input mask, we want to make sure that it's one single character. Is that character optional or is it required? Well, we've already said it's required down below. So I'm going to put in a 9. A 0 is the other option if it's optional, but we're going to put in a 9. We're going to put in our semicolon now. And if we wanted to, we can store the actual mask data with the data that gets entered, but there is no mask data here. There's no extra characters that go in there. So we don't have to put anything in here. If we wanted to, we could put a 1 or a 0. So the 1 is going to represent us just storing the data. A 0 would mean we want the mask data and the actual data that gets entered in here. Next, we'll put in a placeholder. Now, if we wanted to, we could put in an underscore, for example, and that would show the spot where the actual characters get typed, but it's only going to be one character. We don't need it, and we want to make sure that that default number of 4 that we've set up down here, the default value, shows if we put a placeholder in here, it replaces the 4. So that's it. I'm going to hit Tab. It moves me to the next field and preserves my input mask. Now, if I go to switch to Datasheet View, I'm going to be prompted to save my changes, so I might as well come up here and save them ahead of time. Now I'm going to go to my Datasheet View, switches me over. You can see the 4 is still showing up here in the new record, and I'm just going to click over here by CD and hit my Tab key a couple of times. Gets me down to the new record. I'm going to hit Tab again, and I'm going to type in now 2. Again, that's various artists. The rating's 4, that's perfect. It's on CD. I'm going to put in excellent here. This is actually on rack 4. I just got it. It's on the new rack. It's a CD. Now if I go back here to my rating and I try to put in more than one digit, let's say I want to put in 33. I type in the 3 and then as I hit 3 again, it's not letting me add any other characters. I'm only allowed the 1. So 4 was the default. I can put in a 1, I can put in a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5. Oh, I can also put in a 6. So I can only put in one character. I'm going to leave it at 4. But I'm also allowed to put in numbers higher than 5. That takes us to the next lesson where we're going to talk about validation rules.